Hello and welcome back to this continuing series to A.K. Warder's Grammar Guide, An Introduction to Pali. Today we look at Lesson 19, which includes the declension of nouns in u, infinitives, Bahubbīhi compounds, and action nouns. This is Pali Studies on the Learn Pali channel. So, if we again begin with our map of genders and noun stem endings, we notice that all genders have a stem in the short u. But again, Warder concentrates on just the masculine and neuter. And so, if we take our example nouns and look at how each of these decline, again we can see that the vocative is the same as the nominative. The vocative plural Bikave is thought to reflect an Eastern dialect and is called a Magdiism. If we now extract the generalized table, we can see that these are very similar to the I stem declensions we saw last week, but with a U substituting for I and a V for Y. So, hopefully no surprises there, and let's move on. To infinitives. In many simple grammar guides, you'll see infinitives in English described as that characteristic to form of a verb, to laugh, to sing, to dance. But this can be confusing because in actual fact they're not verbs, but are instead noun phrases created from verbs, and so they play the role of a noun, often being the object or complement to another verb. And in a similar way to participles, although infinitives are noun phrases, they do retain some verb-like properties. Technically they are non-finite and most often refer to the same time as that of the main verb. But the perfective aspect can be used for something that occurs before the main verb, or the progressive for something which happens over a period of time. And for a recap on verbal aspect, see the tutorial appearing above now. Also in English they're marked for voice, so these are all in the active voice, but in the passive voice the infinitive verb becomes a past participle. And they can be negated just like a normal verb. Infinitives can actually play quite a few different roles in an English sentence, and most are not relevant to what we're studying, so I'm not being too exhaustive here. Now in Pali, we form the infinitive by adding the suffix tung, or sometimes itung, to a present stem or to a strong form of the verbal root. To the present stem, tung is added usually by means of a connecting I vowel, but to stems ending in I, that is the seventh conjugation and causatives, and stems ending in O, it's added directly. When applied to roots, if they end in a vowel, tung is also added directly. This is after they've been strengthened, so roots ending in either a long or a short I, these are strengthened to I, and roots ending in a long and short U, these are strengthened to O. With roots that end in a consonant, a connecting I vowel may be inserted. Or it can be added directly, in which case the initial t sound of tung assimilates to the final consonant. And this often results in a double t, g, or d, and we've seen this before. There are some archaic infinitive endings, and these are mainly borrowed from Sanskrit, but they're rare. And finally, the infinitive in Pali is indeclinable, meaning that it doesn't alter to agree with anything else in the sentence. So let's now look at some examples. The infinitive is often used with desires or wishes, and can also indicate purpose. Notice in this example that the to of to the village comes from the accusative case, being the goal of motion, and satung, to hear, takes an object, the dharma, which is also in the accusative case. And infinitives are also used to express capability. And again, I'm not being exhaustive here. Now, although in English the infinitive is marked to indicate active and passive voice, in Pali the same form is used in either sense. So the boy is able to ask a question, and a question is able to be asked by the boy. The infinitive puchitung is in the same form in each sentence. And the agent then is in nominative or instrumental respectively. And there are also some idiomatic uses which ward a lis, notably the verb dadati, to give, following an infinitive, means to allow. In this example we have a future form of dadati, and this literally means something like, I will not give for him to be struck, but means I will not allow him to be struck. And the verb labati, to obtain, also means something very similar. In this example we have a present participle form of labati, which gives us not getting to go out from the house, or not being allowed to go out of the house. Okay, moving on again. Next we return to compounded words in Pali, and in this lesson we're looking at Bahubbīhi compounds. These have many names, and there is some disagreement about what is and is not a Bahubbīhi. But basically it's when another compound is used as an adjective to qualify a separate word. So some call them attributive compounds, or possessive, as we can often use ed at the end. Even exocentric compounds, because they always qualify something outside of themselves. They are essentially equivalent to a relative clause, and can be expressed by a relative expression, such as a C whose B is A, a girl whose feet are bare. Bahubbīhis, then, are not really a type of compound in their own right, but are other compounds used adjectively. The majority are kamadāryas, and where a kamadārya is generally a combination of an adjective plus a noun, when they are used as an adjective themselves, they become Bahubbīhis. And as adjectives, this means that the final member of the compound must sometimes change gender in order to agree with the word being qualified. So here, vana is naturally masculine, but has been made to agree by taking the same ending as devata, which is a feminine. Or in this example, jivha is feminine, but has been recast as a masculine nominative to agree with raja. Sometimes it's better to think in terms of the relative formula and use relative pronouns, especially when the first member of the compound is a past participle, which then tends to have a more present perfective sense. So a subdued senses recluse may be better rendered as a recluse whose senses have been subdued. A cut worries Brahmin is a Brahmin whose worries have been cut. And some are less obvious. This is literally the ascended man tree, or the man ascended tree, but means the tree which has been ascended by a man. Or the arrived recluse monastery is the monastery to which a recluse has come. And finally, this example literally translates as arising natured whatever, ceasing natured all that, but means whatever has a nature of arising, all that has a nature of ceasing. So we can see that there can be something of a case relation between the compound and the qualified word. And this brings us to Taparissa compounds. If you remember, with the Taparissa compound, the relation between the compound members is one of a case relation. And these too can be used adjectively. For instance, the Buddha's spoken doctrine, or the doctrine which is spoken by the Buddha. Or a desire-blinded man, a man who is blinded by desire. And even Devanda compounds can be used as adjectives. As we can see, most Bahubbīhis are self-evident, but sometimes it is important to distinguish between the different types. Now, finally, we come to action nouns, not to be confused with agent nouns. An action noun is a word having a verbal root that refers to an event or action itself rather than participation in that event, and so is an abstract noun without referring to an agent, such as hard work in the hard work paid off, or discovery in the discovery was cutting edge, and arrival in his arrival was too late. In Pali there are several ways to form them, but here Warda only mentions the ana suffix. So from dasa to see we get dasana, which means the seeing or sight. Nyapana, to announce, means the announcing or announcement. Gamana, to go, means the going or movement. And savana, to hear, means the hearing or sound. Like most nouns, they decline, in this case like A-stem nouns, to indicate the role that they're playing in the sentence. But being verb-like, they can also take an object, which is usually in either the accusative or genitive case. So this is literally, we go for the seeing of Gautama. And more often than not, the agent is the same as that of the main verb, but occasionally the agent of the action noun can be placed in either the genitive or instrumental case. As in, this will be the last sight of Vesali for the Tathagata. Well, that about wraps it up for lesson 19. Warda gives us several pages of vocabulary, followed by exercise 19, and there are, as always, links below to the answers to last week's exercise. In next week's lesson we cover the declension of more noun groups, and there's more on the Bahubbīhi compounds. But in the meantime, don't forget my other tutorials, and there's also my blog.